Okay.
Welcome back to SME Business TV with me, your host Frankie Goodman. And today I'm joined by Elliot Lewis, Head of Private Client Department for Thackeray Williams. And you deal predominantly with things like wills and inheritance tax planning. Welcome to the show. And
Thank you very much.
How are things for you at the moment?
We're actually really busy at the moment. We've got lots of clients out there who understandably are concerned about their situation and wanting to get wills in place. They're often things that people put on the back burner for quite a long time. And I think with these circumstances in society, people really are looking to get something in place to tide them over for now and the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and we've had experience of sort of the business that I run in marketing and advertising. We've had some experiences and some exposure to sort of will writing services previously, and it can be kind of frowned upon a little bit. And at the moment, we've also seen in other industries, although they are services that are quite important right now, if you tend to do any sort of promotion around them, people seem to be very sensitive to that and almost turn around and think you're sort of preying on the current situation to try and find business. But I think that's a really bad way to look at it. And I actually think, these things are really important for people to get in place to, protect their, assets, to protect their families, to protect their loved ones and so on. So, how do you kind of deal with that normal objection as to, are you acting in my best interest, or are you actually just trying to, take advantage of this current situation?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand. We're a firm that have been going since the 1940s, and we prepare probably 1,200 wills a year on average for clients. So it's not something which we're just doing at the moment. We do this all day, every day, and have done for decades. The key really is providing a service for our clients and trying to look after them. And, life throws curveballs at you quite often. We're in a particularly big curveball at the moment. And we're really here to try and support clients and help them through their situation. Our costs for dealing with it are as much, if not slightly less for key workers. We've got a bit of a promotion on try and help them at the moment through this difficult time. But generally speaking, if people want to instruct us, we'd be delighted to obviously look after them. But we're solicitors and we're governed by quite strict rules of conduct. We have to act in our clients' best interests at all times. And that's really at the forefront of how we operate. So I hope that gives people some reassurance. The documents we prepare are very much bespoke documents for individual clients. Mm-hmm. So no two wills will be the same. The document that we prepare for you will be different to your neighbour because your circumstances are different. And I think that's what people need to understand really, that it's the key is getting the right advice and good quality advice. I think that's crucial really, especially at this moment in time.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that I actually didn't think about too much until I had a business in place. When I was working for a company and I was employed, it wasn't anything that was at the forefront of my mind really. But the second I sort of became a business owner, all of a sudden it became a lot more prominent to me to kind of try and put that into place. Is that something else that you find? And then how does it change for somebody who, may be an employee to somebody who has a business? What different considerations are there?
There's actually quite a lot to take on board. I mean, there are a few stages through people's lives where circumstances mean they think about putting wills in place. Quite often it's getting married, or it's having your first child or more children. It's starting a business. It's maybe becoming ill, or having someone in your family who becomes ill or passes away. So there are a few staging posts through life. With a business, that is an added level of responsibility you have. Quite often it's yourself and your family, but quite often people have employees they have to look after and customers to support. So I think it really is very crucial for business owners. I know as business owners, I'm a business owner, you spend all your day looking after the business and you don't tend to spend too much time on yourself. And I think business owners are particularly poor at doing that. So I try and encourage people to take time out, especially at the moment really, and try and get things in place to make sure that they're okay and their families are okay should the worst happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I've done some research around will writing previously, and one of the most common well, it is the most common question that comes up, and it's certainly the most searched phrase for people who are looking for will writing is, you know, can I write a will for free, and can I do it myself? Yeah, it's quite, I would never have considered doing it myself. People were constantly looking for free templates to do this with. What are the risks around somebody who wants to do it themselves? And you know, is that something that people should steer clear from?
Well, I mean, I would say they should steer clear from it, and people look at this and go, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Especially if you've got a business or you've got substantial assets, and, you know, houses these days in the UK are worth several £100,000. If people have businesses, they're worth several £100,000, if not millions of pounds, potentially. There are a whole range of inheritance tax allowances and reliefs which have a bearing on how things play out in the event of your passing. I think the simple answer is yes, you can prepare a will yourself. You can get a precedent from W.H. Smith or something like that for not much money. The difficulty is, do you really understand what it is you're leaving and what the tax consequences are and the implications for you and your family? I've dealt with estates as well, and I've dealt with hundreds of estates over the years, and I've had a number of homemade wills. Some of them have been okay. I wouldn't put it any stronger than that. Some of them have been a bit of a disaster. I had one homemade will which was really poorly drafted, and the client had tried to create a trust, which is quite a complex thing to do. Didn't do it properly, as you would expect, and why would they? And I think it cost about £10,000 in cost to try and sort out where to get counsel's opinion, caused problems with the revenue. It's up to the client, of course, or the individual, but for the sake of a few £100, I try and encourage people to get it right. It's one of those things which can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, and that sort of brings us on to the next question that's commonly asked, which is, I'm writing a will, how do I choose an executor?
That's one of the most important decisions, actually, to think about when you put a will in place. And I'd say it's even more so where you have a business. The role of an executor is to step into your shoes in the event of your passing and administer your assets and carry out and ensure the terms of your will are carried through. Where you have a business particularly, I think it's even more important or crucial that you have someone that you trust implicitly to be able to make sensible decisions around your business if you still own the business at the time of your death. You can have beneficiaries as executors. That's quite a common misunderstanding, but that's absolutely fine. So you could have a spouse or other family members, but it's quite useful where you have a business to think about who else would be appropriate to work maybe alongside your spouse, someone who is involved in the business, or if you've got sensible friends or even professionals such as your accountant or solicitor. Quite a lot of clients do that because of the decision making that you need to make in the event of your passing.
Yeah, and is that the common type of people, you know, even thinking for myself here, who would I choose? It's a really difficult thing to make a decision on. What are the common types of people that, you know, people do select as the executor?
Quite often, it's very commonly it's a spouse, but certainly when you have a business, and it depends if the spouse are involved in the business or not. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But if they aren't, then I think it's someone who you trust to help with the business. So it could be a business partner. That's not uncommon, particularly if you have a very strong, close relationship. It could be another member of the family. It could be a sibling. It could be parents, or it could be friends. Or it could be professionals, accountants, and solicitors often act as executors. That can sometimes be useful, especially where you have quite complex businesses or valuable businesses, or businesses with who trade in different jurisdictions. That could be an issue for clients. So it's a really important decision. I can't stress how important it is. And you've just got to make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. You can always keep these things under review. People's relationships change over time. So if you appoint your business partner and hopefully it doesn't happen, you fall out, you can always update your will and appoint someone else. So it's not set in stone. It can always be changed.
Interesting. And obviously changes, I imagine, is a big thing at the moment. People who may have had wills in place a long time ago and may have set them up, they obviously now want to review that, have a look at how that will is structured, because people may have forgotten, or situations may have changed significantly in the last 5 to 10 years, and now obviously we're getting that big realization of the worst can happen, or things can happen that are out of our control. For people who want to review a process, what's the normal thing that they have to go through to do that? If it was written by a different will writing company who they may not have any contact with anymore in a different part of the country,
Sure.
can they use somebody else now? Is it a case that it all needs to be rewritten? If it's something where, it's not the case of just small changes, sometimes is it best to just do the process again? Typically, how does that process look?
There are two things I think to sort of bear in mind, really. How long is it since you last reviewed your will? And also what changes you wish to make. If, for example, there are any small changes, it's a change to a legacy, for example, you have some 5,000, you want to change it to 10,000, you can do it by way of a codicil, which is just a small amendment to a will. If, however, you are thinking about changing executors, changing the residue of your estate, then I think, or it's been 5 or 10 years since you last reviewed matters, I think in those circumstances, probably is a good idea to start again. If you do need to get your will from an old solicitor or an old will writer, they are your documents, so you are entitled to request them. We can prepare authorities for people to do that. Sometimes we've seen it with will writers, if they go out of business and you can't maybe track down the will, then again, I think you're pretty much stuck with having to start again. But certainly if it was 5, 10 years ago, I normally advise clients to review wills every 5 or 10 years anyway. People's lives do move on, things change. Even if it's pulling out the drawer and having a read of it, it may be fit for purpose, but it may not. So it's a good idea to keep these things under pretty regular review.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective in business, things have changed in the last 18 months massively.
Yeah.
And then
Sure.
especially
Especially at the moment.
It is so fast paced and so changing all the time. So I can imagine it does make sense to keep it up to date. And if somebody has a will in place with yourselves,
yeah,
is it after an 18-month period, if I did feel there was a significant enough change that I felt, the will needed a review and needed looking at, in terms of sort of the investment that I would need to make, is it easier? Is it less time needed now? Is the fees less because obviously the original structure of everything was in place? Is that a simple process, or?
It can be. Again, it very much depends on what's changed in your life. I think it's difficult to give a sort of same answer for everybody. If it's a pretty simple change, you've maybe fallen out with someone, you want to appoint a new executor, that's very simple, and it'd be a pretty small change to your will. If, however, your business has changed and you've gone from maybe a trading business to a non-trading business, or you've opened up, or you've got assets in different jurisdictions, for example, you bought a holiday home in France or in Italy, and you need to have a complete look at your situation, or the value of your business has either gone up or down, that probably would warrant a proper sit down and talk through. No one size fits all. It's very much based on the client's situation. But I think, I normally advise 5 to 10 years, but unless things change in the meantime. So if you're 18 months down the track and your business isn't what it was 18 months ago, it's a different animal, then I think that actually probably would warrant a proper conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously this is a time for reflection at the moment. A lot of people are starting to look a little bit more at the detail that we, may not have been able to look at in the normal circumstances because things are just too busy. It's something that was in the back of our minds, and even I'm thinking of things that I'm thinking now, actually I would like to move forward and get that into place now because I've got a bit more time on my hands. However, obviously the circumstances are very unusual, and face-to-face contact is extremely difficult. If I wanted a will now, is it something that can still be done? Is it something that can still be signed and put into place? How does that look at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we are in unprecedented times, really. We very much normally work on the basis of a face-to-face meeting. We're doing lots of Zoom meetings at the moment, or telephone conference calls. It's not as good as sitting down around a table with someone, but it's pretty close. And normally throughout the process, we'd have an initial conversation with the client to take their instructions, talk through their situation. We'd normally then prepare a draft, and then there'd be often a second meeting. Again, it could be a Zoom meeting or a telephone conference to go through the draft to make sure they're happy with it. And we then send the document out to be signed. Now, historically, we'd have people come into the office, or we'd pop out and see them at home or work, and we could act as the witnesses. Because of social distancing, that's proved really difficult. We've been a bit more creative, or as much as you can be, about how you get these documents signed. So it's what the law says, and this goes back to 1837. It's not a recent bit of legislation about how you get a will signed and witnessed. It has to be witnessed in the presence of two people who have to be in each other's presence and in the presence of the testator or the person signing the will. But as long as you've got a line of sight, so it could be through a letterbox or an open door, but keeping your distance, or we've had people stand in a garden and look through a clear glass window into the house for someone signing. We've had a will signed in a car park in Beckenham. Again, keeping a social distance. An 87-year-old client of ours needed to get his will signed. We had to be very careful. So there are ways around it, as long as you comply with the legislation. We've got instructions as to getting wills signed and witnessed, which we'd really want people to follow pretty carefully. And we've got some information on how we do that in the current climate. The law hasn't changed. People tend to think that it's maybe loosened a bit, but it hasn't really. I think we're just trying to be a little bit more creative about how you can satisfy the legislation and make sure that any will you put in place is going to be valid.
Yes, that makes sense. And I understand you also deal with inheritance tax planning. Is there anything around that at the moment that's sort of coming to light, and is there any changes around that at the moment?
The main change for business clients particularly is there's an inheritance tax relief called business property relief. The government generally try and encourage entrepreneurial activity. So there are quite big reliefs on holding assets in trading companies, and it has to be a trading company. You also have to have held the assets for more than 2 years. The way the wind's blowing at the moment, the government are really short of cash, and the revenue in particular. So they're really looking at narrowing the scope of where they can apply business property relief. So the sort of issues that we tend to come across which cause some difficulties are where clients have a business which does a mixture of activities, maybe trading and non-trading. And you have to look at the business in the round and see where it really gets its money from. And if you look at it as a whole, what type of business is it? Is it really a trading? Is it really non-trading? Where does it make its profit? In an ideal world, you would try and keep your trading and non-trading activities separate, probably ideally the separate businesses. So if you can claim tax relief on one of them, you're not, the waters aren't muddied by your non-trading activities. So we're spending a lot of time with clients looking at those sort of structures. We often work with clients' accountants. They've got a very big part to play in any tax planning. Normally where someone passes away, we would get a valuation of someone's business. And within that, we would ask the accountants whether, in their opinion, the business qualifies for something called business property relief. If you can get business property relief, it's at two rates, 100% and 50%. 100% relief obviously would be perfect for most people. It's so if you've got a business worth £500,000, then for inheritance tax purposes, it's in your account at nil value. So it's a very valuable relief. It's something that we look at pretty closely with clients. There are some assets where you maybe have premises which your business actually rents out from you, but you own it personally. If you have a controlling shareholding in the business, then you get 50% tax relief on that. So there are a few things that you need to look at. It's really the type of business, the nature of the business, whether it's trading or non-trading. You also need to have held the business assets for at least 2 years, which for most clients that's not an issue. But certainly if you're starting a business up, there's a 2-year time window that you have to get through to get the tax relief.
Okay.
So that's it's reasonably complex, but each client's different. But the key really is to sit down with an individual, the clients or the business owners, partners, and really have a look at the nature of the business and what their plans are for the future.
Yeah, and I think like what you just said there, that's really important. I think, you know, a lot of people's plans have changed as circumstances change. I think it's important we have conversations. I think we've got a bit more time to have conversations at the moment, and there's certainly things that have come out you know, even just on this conversation here that I wouldn't really have considered, but by just having that conversation with someone and just trying to play it through. And when you start to speak it out loud, you actually go, oh, you know, there are things that maybe I should be doing. So, do you have a way that, you know, people can just reach out to you, even if they don't have anything in place where, you know, they've got an idea of what it is they want, but they can just play out that scenario and just have a chat with you to see if there are things that they should have in place?
Yeah, I mean, we're always very, you know, happy and keen to talk to people. So if they were kind enough to sort of make contact with us, then we'd be very happy to look through the situation. I head up the firm's private client department. We've got 14 solicitors in my team, so over 200 years experience. So we've got a lot of people who've done a lot of wills, they've drafted a lot of wills over the years. We tend to draft about 1,000 to 1,200 wills a year for clients. It's a huge part of our business. So it's very rare that we talk to a client and they have a situation that we haven't seen before. So I think that's helpful. I've got a number of people in the team who specialise in looking after business owners, particularly around the inheritance tax reliefs for business owners and maximising those. There's a structure that we've got in place where clients are valuable businesses, where we talk about using the value in the business for the future. It's quite a complex structure, but for the right client, it works really well. And it's really just knowing what inheritance tax reliefs are out there and how you can best use those.
Yeah, it's not something that I've considered personally before. So, you know, it would be really interesting to sort of have one of those discussions. So very useful.
Yeah.
I think we've covered quite a bit there. And I think, you know, there's some really useful information. And I hope that it sort of piques some sort of considerations in people's minds to actually, you know, do that bit of planning, just have those conversations at the moment, because I think it's really important. And, you know, while I think we all have a bit more time, I think we're kind of all firefighting a little bit at the moment, rather than putting that sort of future planning in place. And future planning, you know, is becoming ever more prominent at the moment, that we need to have you know, our affairs in order. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no,